Welcome to the 32nd episode of Dialogika, a podcast between two friends about the latest in politics, society, and feminism
in Indonesia and the world. I'm Stephanie Tangkilisan.
And I'm Sweden Lee.
And this week we have a very special guest, Sakdiyah Ma'ruf, one of Indonesia's fiercest hijabi stand-up comedian. Some of you may be wondering why we're talking to a stand-up comedian, but we had a really heavy episode last week, and I really do think, and I think Sweden shares the sentiment, that comedy, especially the one Sakdiyah does, can be considered very feminist and something that really challenges and upends a lot of society norms and stereotypes.
And we're really excited to share this with you. Apologies for the less than pristine sound quality because it was a busy cafe, but I think it's gonna be a great conversation to listen to.
So here's to it.
So we're in Ubud at this stunning Five Elements. Looking at all these bamboos, I suddenly have this idea that Indonesian jihadis should really stop using guns. Well, because it's too American. and start using local weapon, the bambu runcing. Sharpened bamboo stick. This will definitely earn them better image than other terrorists because then they can brand their action with eco-terrorism. We hate you, but we love the environment.
I first saw her at a Jakarta Foreign Correspondents Club meeting, which I crashed with a friend, and I came because she was the main act, and I was really interested in a hijabi Muslim stand-up comedian, and just because I love stand-up comedy, and I was really interested in hearing about life from her, and I, being the shy, awkward person that I am, and seeing her swarmed by various foreign correspondents from really big names, kind of just shuffled myself out. But I did introduce myself briefly and then added her on Twitter and then shuffled myself out. But then I saw her again in Perempuan Berhak, which is a all-female stand-up comedian act, which was super packed and sold out within hours. And her, along with 5 other women, talked about the problems of being an Indonesian woman, and just the humor of it all was just amazing, and the energy was great, and I just really enjoyed it. So I thought it would be wonderful if we can talk to her. So I tweeted at her, and then eventually we got this interview, and so I was talking to her, but not me because I'm in New York.
I think Stephanie has a real serious case of FOMO right now.
FOMO so bad.
It's really funny actually because Sakdiyah remembers you from that Jakarta Foreign.
Oh, what did she say?
I asked her, right, how did you know Stephanie? And she said, oh yeah, she approached me after the Foreign Correspondents dinner event, and that's how it all started, and it's. So even shy you have made an impression on Sakdiyah.
God.
It's actually really interesting, right? I didn't know of Sakdiyah until Stephanie pointed me to her, and so I don't have the opportunity or the experience of watching her live. I've only seen her clips on YouTube, but I was really excited to meet up with her and talk to her about her comedy, her experiences, and sort of her perspective on how to use humor to cut through some of the most tenuous and controversial issues, not only in Indonesia, but in society in general. Stephanie and I both love comedy, especially we're
the kind of people who grew up on The Daily Show, so we definitely feel the impact of comedy, and that intersection with politics is something that's very educational to people and can really upend and challenge previously held beliefs. We think that Sakdiyah is doing that for our Indonesian audiences, so a lot of props to her for doing that, and I think it takes a lot of bravery and courage to kind of make fun about a lot of Indonesian culture and society, because sometimes we can get pretty sensitive about a lot of things.
But it's also kind of great, right? Because sometimes the only way to talk about these issues is through humor, especially in Indonesia, where we don't want to talk about serious issues. Sometimes we just like skirt around it.
Yeah. And so it's really breaking into people who otherwise wouldn't, read about politics or read about feminism.
Yeah. And I also think, right, any opportunity to include diverse voices, a different voice, in particular this, amazing female hijabi Muslim woman from Indonesia doing stand-up comedy in English and in Indonesian, like we should never pass up an opportunity to do that. And we're really excited to share this interview with you listeners.
So here's to it.
So thank you again for agreeing to do this interview with us at
My
Dialogika.
pleasure. It's amazing.
Do you want to introduce yourself and what you do for our listeners?
Hi, I'm Sakdiyah Ma'ruf, and I'm a stand-up comedian.
How long have you been doing stand-up comedy?
I started in 2009 doing college gigs. Well, it's not actually gigs when you don't get paid for it, but officially I started in 2011. I participated in this talent contest in Kompas TV in Indonesia, where surprisingly I was the only woman performing.
Really?
Yes, back in 2011. So I am sort of acknowledged as the first Muslim female stand-up comedian in Indonesia. Technicality. It's, people make quite a big deal out of it, but...
It's a lot of adjectives.
Yes, but I always thought of it as something technical, like I'm technically the first. It's not like, let's be the first and change the world and things like that. No, I'm technically the first.
And how was that scene like in 2011 when you were the only female comedian in that lineup? How did it feel to be in that situation?
It feels great. I got a lot of support and appreciation, not because I'm funny, but because I'm the only one. And sort of like affirmative action. We're happy that we have women in the group, and so...
Diversity, right?
Diversity, yes. And so our audience will be happy that we have everyone represented. Things like that. Because... I probably downplay myself too much, but I thought, I don't know, I thought because some of my jokes, some of my materials is also about my experience living as a Muslim woman, not in Indonesia in general, but in a very specific Arab descent community in Pekalongan, Central Java, where I was born. So,
did you come up from a particularly funny family, or is it like, what was your environment or relationship to humor and comedy growing up, I guess?
My family is a huge fan of comedy, traditional comedy especially. My dad was especially brilliant with storytelling.
Oh, wow.
He was a sailor.
Wow.
And he travels different parts of the world, but also different parts of Indonesia, and he could do accents of different ethnic groups in Indonesia. So it was pretty funny. Generally, I would say it's in our DNA. It's in our DNA. Not only my family, but also in general, most Arab descent men and women are funny. And unfortunately, though, what I observe is they are funny in a bit of arrogant way. So it's more looking down at people somehow.
Okay.
So being humor to express superiority somehow. So that's particularly with the men, and with the woman, it's all expressions of pain, of being, living in a more, living in a conservative context where women are supposed to be submissive, and so basically the situations is men will talk about other people that they consider inferior to them, but then women will talk about their men, and so and also their experience and their pain, more self-deprecatory manner. And so I really don't think that I'm as funny as some of the people in my in my community. They are hilarious. I'm just very fortunate that I can structure it into and then deliver it into a performance. Yeah, I remember doing these silly jokes in front of students, high school students in Denmark.
Wow.
And yes. And that high school is quite unique because 80% of the students are immigrants.
Wow,
yes,
that's
mostly Muslim immigrants, and they are, of course, on a daily basis facing challenges of living as minority in Europe and in the era of Islamophobia.
Yeah.
And then I just told them, you know what? I think it's wrong to associate terrorists with Muslims. The correct one is to associate terrorists with the Kardashians. They are desperate for attentions and they like to put up videos online.
That is true.
Yeah,
that is true.
And I got a lot of positive response, applause, and I remember them. Some of the students who are Muslims wearing veils as well, wearing hijab. I remember them looking at me and say yes, and it's like finally somebody said it.
Oftentimes I feel like the word Muslim or being Muslim is used either in insulting terms, derogatory terms, offensive terms, but also as a butt of a joke, or as the setup of a joke or something like that, trying to reclaim that space so that it's not just that identity is not used just to make a clever remark. I think that can be very refreshing, and as you said, these minority groups are empowered by it, right?
Yeah.
And I think comedy is so...
It gives your dignity back.
Yeah. And it does so in such a unassuming fashion. Like you don't... Sometimes you just don't expect it, and then you're like, wait a minute, I can laugh at this.
Yeah.
And I feel like my identity is no longer ignored, and my being is no longer ignored, and that's powerful.
Yes. And it can lead to social change somehow.
Hopefully,
but,
right? Yeah.
Somehow, because then you empower people, and then you elevate their dignity, and
maybe
I don't know. They're probably then thinking of doing something about their situations. Us comedians, we'll keep
making
doing jokes, and you guys go do the actual social change. Yeah. Why not? We do our part.
Yes.
I know for a fact that life is sometimes scary, especially when you're asking for permission from your dad to kiss your boyfriend. I don't know about you, but as a devout Muslim woman, I would never dare to try that. The asking for permission, not the kissing. I did kiss my boyfriends. Many times. Via text message.
you correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
I don't think most people think that Arab cultures are particularly funny
Oh,
or
yes.
particularly humorous.
I understand that. I understand. I mean, I understand that, and that is because of some of the contradictions. So when people think, or the stereotype of Arab culture or Arab descent culture in different parts of the world are more conservative, more exclusive, more reserved. Sometimes are identical with the violence somehow.
It seems like there's like a power dynamic between
Many
men
of
and
them
women.
are true. And not, stereotypes are not all wrong because we have to admit that stereotypes is an exaggerated versions of the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason that there's a stereotype about a certain. Yeah, I mean, it's not all encompassing, but it's true for some contexts and situations in my community.
You probably did not expect that humor would be sort of like that way, or comedy. I guess a career in comedy would be that way out, right?
It's healing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's catharsis.
Yeah.
It's an outlet for you to share. I used to tell this joke that can only be contextual in Indonesia, and this is a little bit about domestic violence. I don't know if it's going to be funny to your listener, but I get a lot of positive response. I said something like, I used to see my dad practicing badminton with my mom.
Oh God.
But then I realized that he's not Chinese.
Yes.
Because most of badminton players
Especially
in
in
Indonesia are of Chinese descent.
Yes.
And that's basically how I use metaphor to sort of remember some of the
issues, I guess.
yeah violence happening in the context of my family as well, and trying to laugh about it and to forgive things like that.
I am very fortunate that my parents supported my education with so many conditions that I wish I had a lawyer to help me negotiate. For example, I can go to college, but I'm not allowed to leave dorm after class. I am not allowed to participate in student organizations or any extracurricular activities. I am not allowed to speak up. Most importantly, I am not allowed to meet anyone from the opposite sex, let alone date them. Back then I thought, wow, I didn't know that my father was such a great supporter of lesbianism.
I think one of the ways, I'm not a comedian at all, so I can't speak on that front, but at least as somebody who's a fan of comedy, I always find it amazing that how a really solidly good joke can completely get everybody on your side, can completely change the power dynamic, can get people to listen in ways that, logical arguments might not in any way ever be able to. Do you find that doing your kind of comedy in Indonesia in the past year or two, I guess, when politics has been very heated, especially in Jakarta, right? We all know the things that have happened with Ahok and everyone else. Doing comedy in this kind of setting, is it? How do you feel about that? Is it important? Is it hard? Is it?
It's important. First, it's important because by doing comedy and any forms of arts, we can lay out the issue in a more subtle way, maybe.
Yeah.
not covered way, but also more powerful because then people can figure it out by themselves. We're not like telling people what to do.
Yeah.
But it is also very difficult because then we have to like take a stand on every issue. I'm always feeling pressured to like take sides, like whose sides are you on in these issues and whose sides are you on in that issues, and are you being consistent all the time with your choice of sides? How can you claim yourself a liberal when on some issue you go to a more conservative side, for instance, whereas I never claim myself as liberal or conservative.
You're just you.
Yeah, I'm just me. I'm telling jokes and being progressive, being able to speak up. It's a privilege. I have to. It's a privilege not only in a way that it is an honor, but it's a privilege. It's a result of my educations that many other people may not be able to have. It's a result of my English that allows me to access many American stand-up and are inspired by them. It's the privileges are real. Yes, there is the aspect of working hard, but there's also other aspects. Life skills, English, as I mentioned earlier, education, access,
Opportunities,
and things that makes me who I am because of who I am.
Yeah, makes sense.
Things that others may not have, others who are more talented even.
Yeah, understanding where you're coming from, the privileges you have, and using those privileges, right, to help empower others and bring them up as well when they don't have the same opportunities, the same skills.
I certainly hope so. I mean, one of the most inspiring and experience for me is doing stand-up comedy workshop for young girls in a pesantren, Islamic boarding school.
Exactly.
That was one of the most eye-opening, heartwarming. It was a 2 hours workshop session, but I felt like I owe them my entire life because it makes me realize once again the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing and the reason why I should keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. I mean, I can't put it any better way than that. So I think we're gonna just use that as the closer. One final thing: if our listeners and our supporters want to find out more about you, where you're performing your gigs, like what's the best way to find out more?
I guess you can follow my Twitter account.
What's your Twitter account?
It's at Sakdiyah Ma'ruf, at SAKDIYAHMARUF.
We will link to Sakdiyah's Twitter account on our social media pages and on our website. When's your next gig?
My next gig, let me think. Oh my gosh. Oh, with LBH Masyarakat, the name is. Yes.
Fantastic.
Translated into English, Community Legal Aid for commemorations of Days Against Death, World Day Against Death Penalty. So I'm very much looking forward for that. And
awesome.
Yeah.
And our listeners, it's all in Jakarta, I assume?
All in Jakarta, yes.
All right, so if our listeners who are in Jakarta, we'll make sure to link you to those events and make sure that you have all the information so that you can attend Sakdiyah's shows and give her your support.
Thank you. Wow.
Thank you so much, Sakdiyah, for coming on the show.
This is exciting.
And we'll be supporting you from the States, from Indonesia, and we'll be looking forward to it.
I certainly hope so. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. You can find more information and resources of whatever we talked about on our website, dialogika.id.
Music credits to John Dealey, Lee Roosevelt, and of course, Broke for Free.
If you like what you hear and want to support us, please review our podcast on the Apple Podcast app or whatever app you use to listen to your podcast. And please share our podcast with your friends. It's the best way to spread the word about Dialogika.
If you want to get more involved, we'd love to hear from you. Our email is dialogikapodcast@gmail.com, or just shoot us a message on our Facebook page.
You can also find us on Instagram, YouTube, SoundCloud, and on Twitter. Please follow us on these various platforms. Our Twitter handle is @DialogikaPod. Also, follow me on Twitter. It's Steph Tank. That's StepHtangk.